And now I'm going to share my screen. And here we are. So what we have in front of us is a story called Menashe and Rachel. And it's one of a number of stories. We had a story a little while ago, that Isaac Bashevis Singer wrote supposedly for children. It was the retelling of the Sodom story with Lot and everything and his family.
And lawyers.
What?
And lawyers.
Yeah. So this time, this is a story that he wrote for Hanukkah. And if I'm not mistaken, this is from a collection of his children's stories in general, but he also had a collection just called 8 Hanukkah stories for the 8 nights of Hanukkah. So this might have been one of them. Let's see how it goes. It's a sweet kind of story. It's it speaks for itself, obviously. Menashe and Rachel. So who's going to be reading for us today?
I'll read it.
Okay, Carney will do it. So
Take it
Beryl,
away?
you can just as you've been wanted to. There you go. Go ahead.
Okay, the poorhouse in Lublin had a special room for children, orphans, sick ones, and cripples. Menashe and Rachel were brought up there. Both of them were orphans and blind. Rachel was born blind, and Menashe became blind from smallpox when he was 3 years old. Every day, a tutor came to teach the children prayers, as well as a chapter of the 5 books of Moses. The older ones also learned passages of the Talmud. Menashe was now barely 9 years old, but already he was known as a prodigy. He knew 20 chapters of the Holy Book by heart. Rachel, who was 8 years old, could recite, "I thank thee" in the morning, the Shema before going to sleep, make benedictions over food, and she also remembered a few supplications in Yiddish. On Hanukkah, the tutor blessed the Hanukkah lights for the children, and every child got Hanukkah money and a dreidel from the poorhouse warden. Rich women brought them pancakes sprinkled with sugar and cinnamon. Some of the charity women maintained that the 2 blind children should not spend too much time together. First of all, Menashe was already a half-grown boy and a scholar, and there was no sense in his playing around with a little girl. Second, it's better for blind children to associate with seeing ones who can help them find their way in the eternal darkness in which they live. But Menashe and Rachel were so very deeply attached to each other that no one could keep them apart. Menashe was not only good at studying the Torah, but also talented with his hands. All the other children got tin dreidels for Hanukkah, but Menashe carved 2 wooden ones for Rachel and himself. When Menashe was telling stories, even the grown-ups came to listen. Not only Rachel, but all the children in the poorhouse were eager to hear his stories. Some his mother had told him when she was still alive. Others he invented. He was unusually deft. In the summer, he went with the other children to the river and did handstands and somersaults in the water. In the winter, when a lot of snow fell, Menashe, together with other children, built a snowman with 2 coals for eyes. Menashe had black hair. His eyes used to be black too, but now they had whitish cataracts. Rachel was known as a beauty. She had golden hair and eyes as blue as cornflowers. Those who knew her could not believe that such shining eyes could be blind. The love between Menashe and Rachel was spoken of not only in the poorhouse, but in the whole neighborhood. Both children said openly that when they grew up, they would marry. Some of the inmates in the poorhouse called them bride and groom. There were some do-gooders who believed the 2 children should be parted by force, but Rachel said that if she was taken away from Menashe, she would drown herself in a well. Menashe warned that he would bite the hand that tried to separate him from Rachel. The poorhouse warden went to ask the advice of the Lublin rabbi, and the rabbi said that the children should be left in peace. One Hanukkah morning, the children got their Hanukkah money and ate the tasty pancakes. Then they sat down and played dreidel. It was the 6th night of Hanukkah. 6 lights burned in the brass lamp in the window. Until tonight, Menashe and Rachel played together with the other children. But tonight, Menashe said to Rachel, "Rachel, I have no desire to play. Well, neither have I, Rachel answered, but what shall we do? Well, let's sit down near the Hanukkah lamp and just be together. So Menashe led Rachel to the Hanukkah lamp. They followed the sweet smell of the oil in which the wicks were burning. They sat down on a bench. For a while, both of them were silently enjoying each other's company, as well as the warmth that radiated from the little flames. Then Rachel said, Menashe, tell me a story. Again? I've told you all my stories already. Well, make up a new one, Rachel said. If I tell you my stories now, what will I do when we marry and become husband and wife? I must save some stories for our future. Don't worry. By then, you will have many new stories. You know what? Menashe proposed. You tell me a story this time. I have no story, Rachel said. How do you know that you don't have any? Just say whatever comes to your mind. That's what I do. When I'm asked to tell a story, I begin to talk, not knowing what will come out. But somehow a story crops up by itself. With me, nothing will crop up. Try. You'll laugh at me. No, Rachel, I won't laugh. It grew quiet. One could hear the wood burning in the clay stove. Rachel seemed to hesitate. She wet her lips with the tip of her tongue. Then she began. Once there was a boy and a girl. Aha! He was called Menashe, and she, Rachel. Yes, everyone thought that Menashe and Rachel were blind, but they saw. I know for sure what Rachel saw. What did she see? Menashe asked in astonishment. Other children see from the outside, but Rachel saw from the inside. Because of this, people called her blind. It wasn't true. When people sleep, their eyes are closed, but in their dreams, they can see boys, girls, horses, trees, goats, birds. So it was with Rachel. She saw everything deep in her head, many beautiful things. Could she see colors? Menashe asked. Oh yes, green, blue, yellow, and other colors. I don't know what to call them. Sometimes they jumped around and formed little figures, dolls, flowers. Once she saw an angel with 6 wings. He flew up high and the sky opened its golden doors for him. Could she see the Hanukkah lights? Menashe asked. Not the ones from the outside, but those in her head. Don't you see anything, Menashe? Well, I too see things inside me, Menashe said after a very long pause. I see my father and my mother and also my grandparents. I never told you this, but I remember things from the time I could still see. What do you remember? Rachel asked. Oh, I was sick and the room was full of sunshine. The doctor came, a tall man in a high hat. He told Mother to pull down the curtain because he thought I was sick with the measles, and it's not good when there's too much light in the room if you have measles. But why didn't you tell me this before? Rachel asked. I thought you wouldn't understand. Menashe, I understand everything. Sometimes when I lie in bed at night and cannot fall asleep, I see faces and animals and children dancing in a circle. I see mountains, fields, rivers, gardens, and the moon shining over them. How does the moon look? Like a face with eyes and a nose and a mouth. Oh, true, I remember the moon, Menashe said. Sometimes at night when I lie awake, I see many, many things, and I don't know whether they are real or I'm only imagining. Once I saw a giant so tall his head reached the clouds. He had huge horns and a nose as big as the trunk of an elephant. He walked in the sea, but the water only reached to his knees. I tried to tell the warden what I saw, and he said I was lying, but I was telling the truth. For some time, both children were silent. Then Menashe said, Rachel, as long as we're small, we should never tell these secrets to anybody. People wouldn't believe us. They might think we're making them up. But when we grow up, we will tell. It is written in the Bible, for the Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Who said that? The prophet Samuel. Oh, Menashe, I wish we could grow up quickly and become husband and wife, Rachel said. We will have children that see both from the outside and from the inside. You will kindle Hanukkah lights and I will fry pancakes. You will carve dreidels for our children to play with. And when they go to bed, we'll tell them stories. Later, when they fall asleep, they'll dream about these stories. "Well, we will dream also," Menashe said. "I about you and you about me." "Oh, I dream about you all the time. I see you in my dreams so clearly. Your white skin, chiseled nose, black hair, beautiful eyes. I see you too, a golden girl." Again, there was silence, a silence. Then Rachel said, "I'd like to ask you something, but I'm ashamed to say it." "What is it?" "Give me a kiss." "Are you crazy? It's not allowed. Besides, when a boy kisses a girl, they call him a sissy." "No one will see." "Oh, God sees," Menashe said. "Well, you said that God looks into the heart. In my heart, we're already grown up, and I am your wife. The other children are going to laugh at us. Oh, they're busy with the dreidels. Kiss me, just once." Menashe took Rachel's hand and kissed her quickly. His heart was beating like a little hammer. She kissed him back, and both of their faces were hot. After a while, Menashe said, "It cannot be such a terrible sin, because it is written in the book of Genesis that Jacob loved Rachel and he kissed her when they met. Your name is Rachel too." The poorhouse warden came over. "Children, why are you sitting alone?" "Well, Menashe has just told me a story," Rachel answered. "It's not true. She told me a story," Menashe said.
She told me a story.
"She told me a story, excuse me, yes, she told me a story." "Was it a nice story?" the warden asked. "The most beautiful story in the whole world," Rachel said. "Well, what was it about?" the warden asked. And Menashe said, "About an island far away in an ocean full of lions, leopards, monkeys, as well as eagles and pheasants with golden feathers and silver beaks. There were many trees on the island, fig trees, date trees, pomegranate trees, and a stream with fresh water. There was a boy and a girl there who saved themselves from a shipwreck by clinging to a log. They were like Adam and Eve in paradise, but there was no serpent and—" "The children are fighting over a dreidel. Let me see what's going on," the warden said.
You can tell me.
"You can tell me."
Oops.
Woo, yeah, I'm getting there. "You can tell me the rest of the story tomorrow." He rushed to the table. "Oh, you made up a new story," Rachel said. "What happened next?" "They loved one another and they got married," Menashe said. "Alone on the island forever?" Rachel asked. "Why alone?" Menashe said. "They had many children, 6 boys and 6 girls. Besides, one day a sailboat landed there and the whole family was rescued and taken to the land of Israel."
The end.
The end.
All right. So anybody have anything to comment? Any deep analysis?
It's beautiful.
It is. It's a lovely story.
Just a little gentle story, right? A gentle, nice story for Hanukkah.
It reminded me of there in New Mexico. In Santa Fe. There's a school for the deaf, and the theater I worked at there used to do projects, deaf plays and things like that with the students there. And there was a prevalent feeling that it was not appropriate to view them as handicapped. They didn't see it that way at all, because they had a whole visual world with their hands that they created. So they very much never felt like it was a handicap.
Right. In Israel, there's a theater group for blind people, and they run a theater group, and they also run a restaurant. And the group is called Na Lagat, please touch, because that's their access. Obviously, all their other senses are heightened. That's what we know about people that are deprived of some sense or something. And they actually, you can make reservations to go to dinner there. And when you go to dinner, you go into a space that is sealed off from the light. There's like double, almost like when you go into isolation in, quarantine kind of thing, where there's like these curtains. You go into a space where there's black curtains, and then those black curtains, then you go past those black curtains, another set of black curtains, so that there's no light whatsoever. You can't get, your eyes can't adjust to the light, whatever is there, because there is no light. And you then have to eat dinner as if you were a blind person. So, and you're served by blind people. So, you know, you have to feel along for your you know, your plate and your cup and your cutlery and your food and so on and so forth. And it's a very, you know, it's a very powerful experience. And then the theater, you know, production is also like, you know, good stuff. You know, a lot of spirit that goes into it. What do you think about the warden?
I guess
Anybody have any impression about the warden?
he's the clueless one, I guess, who doesn't see from the inside.
Right. Why is that? I mean, we could really go to town on him if we wanted and make him into some kind of like you say, they're the saintly little children who have wisdom, and he doesn't.
Well, he isn't a monster. He just
He
doesn't.
seems
not a
kindly. He
He's-
seems kindly.
He's
ki-
kindly,
he's
yes.
busy.
He just
He's
doesn't get
busy.
it. Yeah.
He's got a lot of kids to take care of.
He's got a lot of kids to take care of, right? In fact, he sees all the stuff that's going on that they don't see, and he has got to, you know, he's got to run around a lot. So, you know, it is this, you know, this kind of little, as we say today, a bubble, right? These two children who are in their own, you know, bubble, and you hope that this little fairy tale will come true for them. Okay, so shall we go to another story? I say yes. So here we go. This is another one of the Hanukkah stories that Singer wrote, and this is called Hershela and Hanukkah. So, and we didn't do our introduction as we usually do about, you know, telling stories, but of course we already had a story that's all about telling stories, right? That was the first story, and guess what? I won't be giving away too much if I say that the next story is also a story about telling stories. So Hershela and Hanukkah. Carney, you still up for continuing, or somebody else want to read? You're up for it?
I'll go again if you want.
All right, good. Thank you.
So 3 lights burned in the old Reb Beresh's menorah. It was so quiet in the study house that one could hear a wick in the ceiling lamp sucking kerosene. Rabbi Beresh was saying, "Children, when one lives as long as I do, one sees many things and has many stories to tell. What I'm going to tell you now happened in the village of Gorshkow. Gorshkow is small even today, but when I was a boy, the marketplace was an entire village. They used to joke, whenever a peasant comes with his cart to Gorshkow, the head of the horse is at one end of the village and the rear wheels of the cart are at the other end. Fields and forests surrounded Gorshkow on all sides. A man by the name of Isaac Seldis, who lived there, managed a huge estate owned by a Polish squire. The squire, a count, spent all his time abroad and came to Poland only when his money was exhausted. He borrowed more money from Reb Isaac Seldis on mortgage, and gradually his whole estate became Isaac's property. Officially, it still belonged to the squire because a Jew was not allowed to own land in the part of Poland which belonged to Russia. Reb Isaac managed the property with skill. The squire used to flog the peasants when they did something wrong or if the mood struck him. But Reb Isaac spoke to the peasants as if they were his equals, and they were loyal to him. When there was a wedding among them, or when a woman gave birth, he attended the celebration. When a peasant fell sick, Reb Isaac's wife, Kreindl, rolled up her sleeves and applied cups or leeches, or scrubbed the patient with turpentine. Reb Isaac Seldis owned a Britska with 2 horses, and he rode alongside the fields and advised the peasants when to plow, what to sow, or what vegetables to plant. He had a special dairy house on the estate for churning butter and making cheese. He had a large stable of cows, hundreds of chickens that laid eggs, as well as beehives and a watermill. He had everything except children. It caused Reb Isaac and his wife grief. The medications that the doctors of Lublin prescribed for Kreindl never did any good. Even though they were only two people, Reb Isaac and his wife lived in a large house that had once belonged to the present squire's grandfather. But what use is a big house for just a husband and a wife? However, they both had poor relatives whose children came to live on the estate. Reb Isaac hired a teacher to instruct the boys in the Bible and the Talmud. Kreindl taught the girls sewing, knitting, and needlepoint. They stitched biblical scenes into canvas with colored thread, like the story of Abraham attempting to sacrifice his only son on an altar, and the angel preventing him from doing so. Or Jacob meeting Rachel at the well and rolling the stone away so she could sleep and she could water the sheep. Hanukkah was always a gay occasion in Rabbi Isaac's house. After blessing the candles, he gave Hanukkah money to all the children, and they all played dreidel. Kreindl and her maids fried potato pancakes in the kitchen, and they were served with jam and tea. Often, poor people turned up at the estate, and whoever came hungry in tattered clothes and bare feet left with a full belly, warm clothing, and proper footgear. One Hanukkah evening, when the children were playing dreidel and Rabbi Isaac was playing chess with the teacher, who was not only a Talmud scholar but also well-versed in mathematics and language, Rabbi Isaac heard a scratching at the door. The deep snow had fallen outside. If guests visited the estate in winter, they came during the day, not in the evening. Rabbi Isaac opened the door himself, and to his amazement, on the other side of the threshold stood a fawn, still without antlers. Normally, an animal keeps away from human beings, but this fawn seemed hungry, cold, and emaciated. Perhaps it had lost its mother. For a while, Rabbi Isaac stared in wonder. Then he took the young animal by its throat and brought it into the house. When children saw the fawn, they forgot about the dreidel and the Hanukkah gifts. They were all thrilled with the charming animal. When she saw the fawn, Kreindl almost dropped the tray of pancakes she was holding. Rabbi Isaac wanted to give a pancake to the fawn, but Kreindl called out, "Don't do it. It's too young. It needs milk, not pancakes." The maids came in, and one of them went to bring a bowl of milk. The fawn drank all of it and lifted up its head, as if to say, "I want more." This little creature brought much joy to everybody in the house. All agreed that the fawn should not be let out again in the woods, which teemed with wolves, foxes, martens, and even bears. A servant brought in some hay and made a bed for the fawn in one of the rooms. Soon, it fell asleep. Rabbi Isaac thought that soon the children would return to their games, but all they could talk about was the fawn. And Rabbi Isaac and Kreindl had to give them a solemn promise to keep it safe in the house until after Passover. Now the children had extracted this promise, a new debate began. What name to give the fawn? Almost everyone wanted to call it Herschela, which is the Yiddish word for fawn. But for some strange reason, Kreindl said, "You are not going to give this name to the animal." "Why not?" the children and even the grown-ups asked in astonishment. "Oh, I have a reason." When Kreindl said no, it remained no. The children had to come up with another name. And then Kreindl said, "Children, I have it." "Well, what is it?" the children asked in unison. And Kreindl said, "Hanukkah." No one had ever heard of an animal called Hanukkah, but they liked it. Only now did the children start to eat the pancakes, and they washed them down with tea with lemon and jam. Then they began to play dreidel again, and they did not finish the games until midnight. Late at night, when Reb Isaac and Kreindl went to bed, Reb Isaac asked Kreindl, "Why didn't you like the name Herschela for the fawn?" And Kreindl replied, "That is a secret." "A secret from me?" Isaac asked. "Since we were married, you've never had any secrets from me." And Kreindl answered, "This time I cannot tell you." "When will you tell me?" Isaac asked, and Kreindl said, "The secret will reveal itself." Reb Isaac had never heard his wife speak in riddles, but it was not in his nature to insist or to probe. "Now, dear children, I'm going to tell you the secret, even before Kreindl told it to her husband," old Reb Barish said. A few weeks earlier, an old man came to the estate with a sack on his back and a cane in his hand. He had a white beard and white sidelocks. When Kreindl gave him food to eat, he took a large volume out of his sack, and while he ate, he read it. Kreindl had never seen a beggar behave like a rabbi and a scholar. She asked him, "Why do you carry books on your back? Aren't they heavy?" And the old man replied, "Oh, the Torah is never heavy." His words impressed Kreindl, so she began to talk to him, and she told him how grieved she was at not having children. Suddenly, she heard herself say, "I see that you are a holy man. Please pray to God for me and give me your blessing. I promise you that if your blessing is answered in heaven, I will give you a sack full of silver guldens when you return, and you will never need to beg for alms. I promise you that in about a year's time, you will have a child." "Oh, please, holy man," Kreindl said, "give me a token or a sign that your promise will come true." The old man said, "Sometime before your child is conceived, an animal will enter your house. When the child is born, call it by the name of this animal. Please remember my words." Before the old man left, Kreindl wanted to give him clothes and food, but he said, "God will provide all this for me. I don't need to prepare it in advance. Besides, my sack is filled with sacred books and there's no place for anything else." He lifted his hands over Kreindl's head and blessed her. Then he left as quietly as he had come. Kreindl pondered the words of this strange old man for many weeks. Rabbi Isaac happened not to be at home when he came, and Kreindl did not tell her husband about his visit. She had received many wishes and benedictions from gypsies, fortune tellers, and wanderers, and she did not want to arouse hopes in Isaac that might never materialize. That night, when the fawn came into the house, Kreindl understood that this was the animal the beggar had mentioned. Since the fawn is called Herschela in Yiddish, she would give birth to a male child and call him Herschela. Kreindl's words that the secret would reveal itself soon came true. She became pregnant, and Rabbi Isaac understood that the coming of the fawn was an omen of this hoped-for event. He said, "When our child is born, if it is a male, we'll call it Herschela." And Kreindl answered, "As you wish, my beloved, so will it be." Winter had passed, spring had come. Hanukkah had been growing in the cold winter months, and he sprouted antlers. Everyone could see that the animal was no longer happy indoors. His beautiful eyes expressed a yearning to go back to the forest. One morning, Kreindl gave Hanukkah a tasty meal of hay mixed with chopped potatoes and carrots, and then opened the gate to the fields and forests. Hanukkah gave his mistress a look and said, "Thank you," and he ran to the green pastures and the woods. Kreindl predicted that in the winter, Hanukkah would turn up again, but Rabbi Isaac said such things cannot be foretold. Hanukkah has grown up, and an adult deer can find its own food, even in winter. Not long after, Kreindl gave birth to a healthy little boy with dark hair and brown eyes, and there was great joy in the house. The happy father and mother had prepared a special repast for the poor on the day of the circumcision ceremony. Reb Isaac and Kreindl both hoped that the old beggar might hear about it and come to the feast, but he never came. However, other poor people heard about it and they came. A large table was placed on the lawn, and the needy men and women were served challah, gefilte fish, chicken, fruit, as well as wine and honey cake. Some of the younger crowd danced a scissor dance, a good morning dance, an angry dance, a kazaksa,
Kazatska.
kazatska. Before they left, all the poor got gifts of money, food, and clothes.
The Kazatska, you see it in Fiddler on the Roof. It's when they sort of crouch and then stick out one foot after
kick
another.
their legs out. Right.
Right.
That's the one. Now I recognize it. Yes.
I don't know what the other ones are.
The summer drew to a close and it became cool again. After the Sukkot holiday, the rains, the snowfall, and the frost began. The Feast of Hanukkah approached, and although everyone wondered what had happened to the fawn in cold weather, nobody spoke about it, so as not to worry Kreindl. This winter was even more severe than the former one. The whole estate was buried in snow. On the first night of Hanukkah, Kreindl and the maids were busy frying pancakes. After Reb Isaac blessed the first light and gave coins to the children, they sat down to play dreidel. The baby, Herschela, slept in his cradle. Children of the house had prepared a gift for him, a fawn made of sugar, and on its belly was the inscription, Hanukkah. When it was given to Herschel, he immediately began to suck on it. But the fawn didn't come that night. Reb Isaac comforted Kreindl by quoting the Gemara. Miracles don't happen every day. Kreindl shook her head. I hope to God that Hanukkah is not hungry and cold. On the second night of Hanukkah, while all the children were playing dreidel, Reb Isaac was about to checkmate the teacher. And Kreindl, along with the maids, was preparing to clean the table. They heard a scratching on the door. Kreindl ran to open it and cried out with joy. At the door stood Hanukkah, already a half-grown deer, silvery with frost. He had not forgotten his benefactors. He had come to stay for the winter. Herschel woke up from the noise, and when he was shown the animal, he stretched out his little hand toward him. Hanukkah licked the hand with his tongue as if he knew that Herschel was his namesake. From then on, the deer came to the estate every year, and always about the time of Hanukkah. He'd become a big stag with large antlers. Herschel grew too, although not as fast. The third winter, the deer brought a doe with him. It seemed that he had fought for his mate with another stag because a part of his antler was broken.
Thank you for your call.
Hanukkah and his mate were taken in. There was much discussion among the children what to name Hanukkah's wife. This time the teacher made a proposal. She was named Zot Hanukkah. This is how the section of the Bible that is read on the Sabbath of Hanukkah begins. The word Zot, which means this, indicates the feminine gender. This name pleased everyone. Red Barish paused for a long time. The lights in the brass lamp were still burning. Children felt that the little flames were also listening to the story. Then a boy asked, did the old beggar ever come back? No, I never heard that he did, but you can be sure that this man was not just an ordinary beggar. Well, what was he? Another boy asked. The prophet Elijah, Red Barish said. It is known that Elijah is the angel of good tidings. He never comes in the image of an angel. People would go blind if they looked into the dazzling light of an angel. He always comes disguised as a poor man. Even the Messiah, according to the Talmud, will come in the disguise of a poor man, riding on a donkey. Old Reb Barish closed his eyes, and it was hard to know whether he was dozing or contemplating the coming of the Messiah. He opened them again and said, now you can go home and play dreidel. Will you tell us another story tomorrow? Another boy asked, and old Reb Barish replied, with God's help, I have lived long and I have more stories to tell than you have hair in your side locks.
There you go. The end.
Amen. The end.
So let me see what's going on here. Stop share. Okay. So welcome those people that came in the middle. I hope that you were able to catch up with the convoluted ins and outs of this complicated thriller that we just read. Okay. Anybody want to share anything? Yes, go ahead, Josie. Unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Yeah. About a week ago, I looked out my window, and in the yard next to me, there was a half-grown buck with
No kidding.
small antlers. And it was the most thrilling sight of Mother Nature right out here in Montclair. And he stayed around most of the day. And every day I look out to see if he's coming back, but I haven't seen him since.
Maybe you're having a baby.
I don't think so. I got grandchildren. But it was
No
thrilling.
comment.
It was a beautiful sight.
Very nice. Yeah, there's something about those animals, right? We like those animals. Like there's a whole article in the Times from the weekend. We don't like bats, but we do like deer. Go figure. I don't know. So yeah.
I like bats.
You like bats. Good. Good. Very good.
They eat the mosquitoes.
Well, we know that they're very useful. We know that they're very important.
I love the image of the donkey's head being one end of the village and the tail the other. It's very singer, it's very Singerian, I guess you'd say.
Well,
Like-
I don't think he actually invented that. That's what sounds to me like a very authentic, Yiddish kind of folk
Folktale.
my town was so small that's like, etc. That's what was being said here. So I actually, now I forgot. What was the context? Where was this story told actually? Do we remember?
Which room?
Yeah, where was it? No, where was the story?
Was it Poland?
Yeah, but where is Rabberish? The study house. It's in the study house, right? Because we had two stories, right? One story took place in the orphan section of the poorhouse, and this story took place in the study hall in the base medrash, right? So this Rabberish is not necessarily these people's teacher. He's telling stories to the kids, but he's another guy that hangs out in the base medrash, who hangs out in the study hall. Of course, they're not exactly studying the deepest intricacies of the Talmud. They're hanging around and they're telling, and they're listening to some stories and shared wisdom. So okay, good. And does this have anything to do with Hanukkah? I mean, could the story just have easily have been, Hershala and Pesach, and this deer comes, Pesach time. Yeah, Lynn.
Seems to be a symbolism of, incubation. So bringing in the animals out of the cold for the season until it's warm enough to go back, taking care of the woman until she becomes pregnant and can bring forth a child, seems to be sort of symbolic in those ways.
Okay, good.
And the antlers maybe like the menorah.
Right. That's an association, right? That we can imagine the full-grown antlers being like the branches of a menorah, of a Chanukiah. Yeah. And what did Rabberish say at the end about Elijah?
He always comes as a poor man.
He has to be disguised. He can't come in his celestial, reality. The angels can't come that way. Elijah can't come, because if they came down from heaven the way they really are, too much light, right? We would be blinded. There's that little hook with the other story. We would be blinded by the too much light. In the Gemara, in the Talmud, a blind person is called Sagi Nahor, which means a person with too much light. That it's not that they're in darkness; it's that they live with too much light. So that's why they can't see the limited kind of light that we have in our world. And of course, we know that we actually, our vision depends on a limited light. There's all kinds of light rays that we absolutely can't see. We can only see what we're able to see. Yeah. All right. Anybody else have any other? How does it? Let me ask a different question, just to keep, to push a little bit. Do these feel like real Isaac Bashevis Singer stories? Is this what we would expected from Bashevis Singer?
Well,
You just muted yourself.
there's not much darkness. I always think of him as having some element of serious darkness.
And I mentioned the fact that we had that Sodom story, so there was some satire, there was some underlying sophistication going on here, pushing the envelope a little bit, a little edginess.
It's usually a twist of some kind
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, this is just like so pure in a certain way, right? Very, very simple, very, very innocent in many ways. Yeah. Josie, you want to say something?
Yeah, the stories that he wrote in America when he was living in New York are much more adult stories of adult problems and failures and love affairs and conflicts. And One of my favorites is Shadows on the Hudson, which is a recreation of all these arguments of the different political and Zionist and anti-Zionist, but it's all set in New York. This has kind of a mystical quality, this story.
Right. He's writing in a nostalgic vein,
Yeah.
right? He's thinking back to Lublin when his father was a rabbi in Lublin, where he grew up. He was a child there, and thinking about that pure life of unquestioning dedication. We've had other stories about people breaking away, and so he certainly broke away. He certainly got left that very pious household that his father, who was a chassidic rabbi, upheld. And there's plenty of that in his writing, and plenty of critique of the religious Jewish world and of religion in general, but not in these two stories, right? And in the Sodom and Gomorrah story, there was critique, and there was, like I say, a kind of an extra little, outsider sophistication, but not really discernibly in these stories. In these stories, he's letting himself sit by the Hanukkah lights and just relax a little bit and just take in the sweetness. Yeah. Good. All right. I didn't line up another story. I figured those two stories might be enough, but we've got a bunch of time left. So if you want to be patient without a screen sharing, I didn't scan another story. There is another Hanukkah story from Singer that I could share with you if you want. So let's see if we'll have time, and if I'll read it and no interruptions, maybe I'll get it done. I have to go get the book. 1 second.
Hey, John. Do you know there's a children's book about a baby bat? It's called Stella Luna.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
I used to read it to my daughter when she was little.
There's a story about the backstage bat. It's about theater and a bat.
Don't know that one.
What's the name of the story, Rabbi? Maybe I can find it on the internet.
Yeah, I don't think you will, but okay. This is a short one. It's called The Power of Light.
Well, Sergey said he was going to look at when he got to the office.
Okay, here we go. The Power of Light. During World War II, after the Nazis had bombed the Warsaw Ghetto, a boy and a girl were hiding in one of the ruins. David, 14 years old, and Rebecca, 13. Right? He likes to have the boy and the girl be 1 year apart, with the boy 1 year older. He likes that. We had that with Menashe and Rachel also. It was winter and bitter cold outside. For weeks, Rebecca had not left the dark, partially collapsed cellar that was their hiding place. But every few days, David would go out to search for food. All the stores had been destroyed in the bombing, and David sometimes found stale bread and cans of food or whatever else had been buried. Making his way through the ruins was dangerous. Sometimes bricks and mortar would fall down, and he could easily lose his way. But if he and Rebecca did not want to die from hunger, he had to take the risk. That day was one of the coldest. Rebecca sat on the ground wrapped in all the garments she possessed. Still, she could not get warm. David had left many hours before, and Rebecca listened in the darkness for the sound of his return, knowing that if he did not come back, nothing remained to her but death. Suddenly, she heard heavy breathing and the sound of a bundle being dropped. David had made his way home. Rebecca could not help but cry, "David! Rebecca!" In the darkness, they embraced and kissed. Then David said, "Rebecca, I found a treasure." "What kind of treasure?" "Cheese, potatoes, dried mushrooms, and a package of candy. And I have another surprise for you." "What surprise?" "Later." Both were too hungry for a long talk. Ravenously, they ate the frozen potatoes, the mushrooms, and part of the cheese. They each had one piece of candy. Then Rebecca asked, "What is it now, day or night?" "I think night has fallen," David replied. He had a wristwatch and kept track of day and night, and also of the days of the week and the month. After a while, Rebecca asked again, "What is the surprise?" "Rebecca, today is the first day of Hanukkah, and I found a candle and some matches." "Hanukkah tonight?" "Yes." "Oh my God. I'm going to bless the Hanukkah candle," David said. He lit a match, and there was light. Rebecca and David stared at their hiding place, bricks, pipes, and the uneven ground. He lighted the candle. Rebecca blinked her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she really saw David. His hair was matted and his face streaked with dirt, but his eyes shone with joy. In spite of the starvation and persecution, David had grown taller, and he seemed older than his age and manly. Young as they both were, they had decided to marry if they could manage to escape from war-ridden Warsaw. As a token of their engagement, David had given Rebecca a shiny groschen he found in his pocket on the day when the building where the both of them lived was bombed. Sorry, hold on. Now David pronounced the benediction over the Hanukkah candle, and Rebecca said, "Amen." They had both lost their families, and they had good reason to be angry with God for sending them so many afflictions. But the light of the candle brought peace into their souls. That glimmer of light, surrounded by so many shadows, seemed to say without words, "Evil has not yet taken complete dominion. A spark of hope is still left." For some time, David and Rebecca had thought about escaping from Warsaw, but how? The ghetto was watched by the Nazis day and night. Each step was dangerous. Rebecca kept delaying their departure. It would be easier in the summer, she often said. But David knew that in their predicament, they had little chance of lasting until then. Somewhere in the forest, there were young men and women called partisans who fought the Nazi invaders. David wanted to reach them. Now, by the light of the Hanukkah candle, Rebecca suddenly felt renewed courage. She said, "David, let's leave." "When?" "When you think it's the right time," she answered. "The right time is now," David said. "I have a plan." For a long time, David explained the details of his plan to Rebecca. It was more than risky. The Nazis had enclosed the ghetto with barbed wire and posted guards armed with machine guns on the surrounding roofs. At night, searchlights lit up all possible exits from the destroyed ghetto. But in his wanderings through the ruins, David had found an opening to a sewer, which he thought might lead to the other side. David told Rebecca that their chances of remaining alive were slim. They could drown in the dirty water or freeze to death. Also, the sewers were full of hungry rats. But Rebecca agreed to take the risk. To remain in the cellar for the winter would mean certain death. When the Hanukkah light began to sputter and flicker before going out, David and Rebecca gathered their few belongings. She packed the remaining food in a kerchief, and David took his matches and a piece of lead pipe for a weapon. In moments of great danger, people become unusually courageous. David and Rebecca were soon on their way through the ruins. They came to passages so narrow, they had to crawl on hands and knees. But the food they had eaten and the joy the Hanukkah candle had awakened in them gave them the courage to continue. After some time, David found the entrance to the sewer. Luckily, the sewage had frozen, and it seemed that the rats had left because of the extreme cold. From time to time, David and Rebecca stopped to rest and to listen. After a while, they crawled on, slowly and carefully. Suddenly, they stopped in their tracks. From above, they could hear the clanging of a trolley car. They had reached the other side of the ghetto. All they needed now was to find a way to get out of the sewer and to leave the city as quickly as possible. Many miracles seemed to happen that Hanukkah night. Because the Nazis were afraid of enemy planes, they had ordered a complete blackout. Because of the bitter cold, there were fewer Gestapo guards. David and Rebecca managed to leave the sewer and steal out of the city without being caught. At dawn, they reached a forest where they were able to rest and have a bite to eat. Even though the partisans were not very far from Warsaw, it took David and Rebecca a week to reach them. They walked at night and hid during the days. sometimes in granaries and sometimes in barns. Some peasants stealthily helped the partisans and those who were running away from the Nazis. From time to time, David and Rebecca got a piece of bread, a few potatoes, a radish, or whatever the peasants could spare. In one village, they encountered a Jewish partisan who had come to get food for his group. He belonged to the Haganah, an organization that sent men from Israel to rescue Jewish refugees from the Nazis in occupied Poland. This young man brought David and Rebecca to the other partisans who roamed the forest. It was the last day of Hanukkah, and that evening, the partisans lit 8 candles. Some of them played dreidel on the stump of an oak tree, while others kept watch. From the day David and Rebecca met the partisans, their life became like a tale in a storybook. They joined more and more refugees who all had but one desire, to settle in the land of Israel. They did not always travel by train or bus. They walked. They slept in stables, in burnt-out houses, and wherever they could hide from the enemy. To reach their destination, they had to cross Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Yugoslavia. Somewhere at the seashore in Yugoslavia, in the middle of the night, a small boat manned by a Haganah crew waited for them, and all the refugees with their meager belongings were packed into it. This all happened silently and in great secrecy, because the Nazis occupied Yugoslavia. But their dangers were far from over. Even though it was spring, the sea was stormy, and the boat was too small for such a long trip. Nazi planes spied the boat and tried without success to sink it with bombs. They also feared the Nazi submarines, which were lurking in the depths. There was nothing the refugees could do besides pray to God, and this time, God seemed to hear their prayers because they managed to land safely. The Jews of Israel greeted them with a love that made them forget their suffering. They were the first refugees who had reached the Holy Land, and they were offered all the help and comfort that could be given. Rebecca and David found relatives in Israel who accepted them with open arms. And although they had become emaciated, they were basically healthy and recovered quickly. After some rest, they were sent to a special school where foreigners were taught modern Hebrew. Both David and Rebecca were diligent students. After finishing high school, David was able to enter the Academy of Engineering in Haifa, and Rebecca, who excelled in languages and literature, studied in Tel Aviv, but they always met on weekends. When Rebecca was 18, she and David were married. They found a small house with a garden in Ramat Gan, a suburb of Tel Aviv. I know all this because David and Rebecca told me their story on a Hanukkah evening in their house in Ramat Gan about 8 years later. The Hanukkah candles were burning, and Rebecca was frying potato pancakes served with applesauce for all of us. David and I were playing dreidel with their little son, Menachem Eliezer, named after both of his grandfathers. David told me that this large wooden dreidel was the same one the partisans had played with on that Hanukkah evening in the forest in Poland. Rebecca said to me, if it had not been for that little candle David brought to our hiding place, we wouldn't be sitting here today. That glimmer of light awakened in us a hope and a strength we didn't know we possessed. We'll give the dreidel to Menachem Eliezer when he is old enough to understand what we went through and how miraculously we were saved. The end.
Is there a story that's before they leave the basement? That's
The
when they
vendor,
go into the
see, in that
basement?
same email.
Is there another story
up
that's sort of
the,
before this one
Excel.
picks
I
up?
don't know. Why, you found
Vendor,
something online?
1770 Crystal Drive.
No, I'm just remembering
says
from
1770
years
Crystal
ago. I
Drive.
was working on a show that was a
When I
stage
asked
adaptation
HOB,
of
they're like, no, that never heard of that.
a bunch
It's
of
not ours.
short stories by a singer, and I can't remember the name of it, but
Where did this
the show
actually
never
come
happened.
from?
It didn't
Uh,
didn't get enough money to get produced. But we had a script, and I remember the story.
all right. So in other words, there was
It
no
was a
other.
singer story. I
I'm
thought.
I just
maybe
want to
I'm
make sure
misremembering, of them
that
going into the basement and
there's
escaping.
no.
They had to escape to get into the basement and not be found. And
But Brad wasn't working on
I don't
the
know.
project.
I don't
that
know.
he-
right.
Ari. And Adrian, hi. Happy Hanukkah. Okay.
She's
So,
busy over there doing business.
Yes, I hear. All right, any other comments?
That was beautiful. Thank you.
So 3 sweet stories, right? 3 Hanukkah candles, each one shedding a little bit of light in their own way. So obviously this one, a little bit more of an updated,
Yes.
story. And there's 1 point or 2 points where a singer sort of, can't resist, where he says, this time God listened. They had every right not to believe in God, but what could I do? They did. I can't take it out of this story. So he lets the story unfold in that way. All right, we're gonna say good evening, and everybody be safe with the storm and whatever it's gonna be, and enjoy the rest of Hanukkah and stay healthy and whatever else. Right, all kinds of good light and blessings. Yes.
You too.
Yes, happy Hanukkah.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Rabbi. Happy
Chag Sameach.
Hanukkah.
Be well,
See you next
everybody.
week.
Yasher koach.